So we're going to switch gears here. I'm going to invite the panelists here for this next segment. If you can all please come up to the stage. And while you're doing this, let me just maybe bring up a few things here. So, you know, as we were preparing for this this discussion for this day, you know, I went back to some of the press releases. I didn't have to go back to 1900. It was just going back to 2019. So I'll just go through a few things, and then I'll introduce the panelists. Thank you again for making the time. It's great. April 2019, in vitro wants to use machine learning and in vitro systems to predict what drug developers would see. 2021, they raised $400 million. Many deals. All in, I think they're close to $800 million. No drugs in the clinic just yet. October 2023, Endpoint News. After years of hype, the first AI-designed drugs, I'm actually interested to know what does that look like, fall short in the clinic. The first AI-designed drugs have ended with disappointment. That's pretty sad, right? Phase 1/2 cancer drug candidate, that's even worse, right? So people put up their expectations for these drugs, and then it actually ends up getting wound down on a adenosine A2A antagonist. I don't know if any of you guys are in that space. That does not feel like biology and AI 2024. Benevolent, unfortunately, dermatitis drug. This was, again, for eczema. TRAC ABC inhibitor. I mean, it's been around for 20 years. May 23, FDA releases 2 white papers on AI and ML. So the regulators are definitely now on the heel of this conversation, right? Drug and biological products development, manufacturing evaluation. Economist, March of this year, artificial intelligence is taking over drug development. Nature, AI serves up targeted inhibitor for lung fibrosis. September 2024, in silico reports positive phase 2A results for what they say is an AI-discovered drug. If you actually dissect the science there, what they've done a really good job at is on the biology. And like Jason was saying, they've identified the right patient segments that are actually going to probably respond to a drug that's against a target that's been known for 20 years. And maybe that's the crux, right? We need to get better at biology. And at the end of the day here, I guess where I am on all this, and hopefully we'll touch on this, is that I'm worried about the hype, but I'm also super excited about what's ahead here, because we are seeing perhaps a different kind of hype cycle. Maybe it's, we got to maybe reinvent the cycle here that's describing what's happening, at least in the biopharma space. So there are plenty of naysayers, there's plenty of hype, but I think, you know, we're making progress. And I'm really enthusiastic about this. You heard it from many of the speakers this morning. You certainly heard it from Jason. So let's go. Let's introduce the panelists. So we've got some amazing leaders here in this space. We've got Marinka Zitnik from Harvard, who's really at the forefront of AI to help us think about scientific discoveries and treatment personalization. We've also got Crystal Brown here, co-founder and CEO of CircNova, innovating on RNA therapeutics, right? So new modality, not necessarily the so-called small molecules designed by medicinal chemists, which are absolutely needed and great. Not the biologics, but the RNA. And then finally, Jeanne Latourelle, SVP of Precision Med at Aitia. Sorry if I mispronounced it. I should say in the French way, Aitia. And bringing really a wealth of experience in applying genomics and AI to drug discovery. So thank you so much. And maybe if you can just, in that order, introduce yourself. And perhaps for this discussion, if you could highlight over your past 3-5 years, whatever short amount of time you want to pick, success, failures, and what we need to do better here in this AI space.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Marinka Zitnik, Assistant Professor of Biomedical Informatics at Harvard Medical School, Kempner, and the Broad Institutes. My research group is focusing on developing foundation AI models that can help with better scientific understanding of medicines and optimal drug design, with the eventual goal of developing AI that can learn and innovate on its own. We're very excited about questions that allow us to close the gap and the bridge between biological research, where we look at molecular structure and cellular readouts and clinically relevant patient-level outcomes. And so that means that we are working a lot on developing models that go across different scales and that capitalize on recent advances in AI that include particularly large-scale self-supervised learning with the goal of generalizing to new types of phenotypes, structures, and molecular cell types through zero-shot learning, few-shot learning, etc. In the last few years, one area that we have seen lots of success is, of course, something that should not come as a surprise given the week that we currently are in, which is that of being able to effectively predict molecular structures, a variety of different types of molecular modalities, not only proteins, but also protein complexes, other types of molecules at close to atom level precision, including for very structures that have not been experimentally designed. And so from the algorithmic standpoint, that's incredibly exciting because it now means that there are some models that are currently capable of being used as drop-in replacement instead of experimental work. And so those are the kind of challenges and problems that I'm very excited about. So one big success. Failure. I think we are still quite far away from understanding the function of those molecules. So yes, we can predict perhaps the structure, but for drug discovery and drug target nomination, what is incredibly important is to understand the function of these molecules in biological environment in which they operate. So in my group, we're very excited to be partnering with Human Cell Atlas, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, where we are training these models in the context of large multimodal, multi-omic single-cell data, which then allows us to start asking questions. If I have here candidate drug target, will it actually be active in the cell type that is relevant for the target therapy being designed or developed, evaluated for rheumatoid arthritis, right? And so that means that we need increasingly models that are dynamically adaptive and their outputs is depends on the biological environment in which the model operates. The role, the function of a gene, its products might change as we go from one cell type to the other, one biological environment to the other, one patient subtype to the other. So there is so much more that we need to do in order to understand functions better, which I think is crucially important for target discovery nomination. One final thing in terms of the exciting future that in my group we are also very much working on relates to what I think are more universal models that can be trained across a large number of diseases. In our very recent work, we've been training a foundation model across 17,000 disease phenotypes. That covers 7,000 rare diseases, of which only 5 to 7% of all patients of those diseases have any FDA-approved therapies. So the profits aside, well, what motivates me as a researcher and as a professor is also being able to deliver some insights and hope for those patients. And opportunities that allow us, that relate to drug development, not just discovery phase, where we think about drugs that are on the market that could be potentially repurposed quickly and at scale to many of those diseases that have very poor or not available treatments is really exciting to me. And I think we are at the stage where this is becoming feasible. One could argue that not every rare disease will get its own big grant or big startup or big funding to develop its own foundation model. But the purpose of foundation models and frontier models is that we train one model at scale across many, many, many diseases and phenotypes. And we are seeing success where by training models, say, on large indications, one can see the benefits going from large indications to some smaller phenotypes. And that allows us to stratify patients better for large indications and also help rare disease patients. So that's what I'm super excited about in the future.
Great. Thank you, Marinka. Crystal, please, if you could walk us through your experience and background, that would be great.
Sure. So, hi, my name is Crystal Brown. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CircNova, where we are focused on AI-driven drug discovery for the development of circular RNA therapeutics, specifically focused on non-coding circular RNAs. And the best part about my job is I get to work with brilliant people like Marinka here who can talk about the intricacies of it. I am on the business side of things, so I'm constantly looking at the market, where the market is going, how we can enter, and how AI is not just hype and it's not just a buzzword. One of the things that I'm most excited about at CircNova is that we're able to leverage AI and we're provided with tools that we didn't have before. So we're able to reduce cycle times, flatten cost curves, and really have like new biological insights that allows us to be able to not only design novel non-coding circular RNAs, but also predict what those structures should be. So when we look at the amount of limited structural data that's been around for the last several years and what we're able to do. Now, it's on a whole different playing field that allows us to be able to pursue different therapies that really did not exist before. So what we're constantly focused on is making sure that we're looking at the right targets where we can have success in delivery, where we can have success when it gets to preclinical and trials, and making sure that we're doing our part to advance that by leveraging our proprietary NOVA engine.
Great.
A little bit more about my background. What I'll add is I'm one of the most non-traditional people that you'll probably meet in biotech. I spent the first 15 years of my career in automotive manufacturing, and I fell into biotech through finance. And that gave me a very different lens. So I'm constantly looking at what are some of the deals being done? What are some of the big biopharmas looking at right now? What diseases do we have the most hope in treating? And then how can I look at that in a very different way that accelerates without losing quality throughout the process? So I think you have to use AI in a very different way because it's applied in biotech very differently than in other industries. And I think that takes looking at it from a very, very different perspective.
Thank you. This is great, cross-sector fertilization. It happens.
It
Innovation and
happens.
that convergence, absolutely.
Listen, I know someone who transitioned recently from Toyota into biotech, and we talk very constantly about you think industries are very separate, but if you look at a lot of the applications, particularly with artificial intelligence and generative AI and how that applies to drug development and drug discovery, we're making advancements that I think the entire industry is shocked by.
Wonderful. Jeanne, please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jeanne Latourelle. I'm SVP of Precision Medicine at Aitia, which is a biotech company over in Union Square in Somerville. And what we do at Aitia, what I do is I lead a team of computational biologists, data scientists, statisticians, leveraging our causal AI platform. So a little different than some of the AI models that we've been talking about. We've actually been doing this for quite a while. I've been with Aitia for 9 years. Before that, I was an epidemiologist by training at Boston University over there. Apologies. But I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. What we are doing is using our causal AI approach to build digital twins. And what we do with these digital twins is a lot of themes that we've talked about so much here, which is to take multimodal data, genetics, omics, and tie that to the clinical data with the explicit goal of getting to those phase 2 efficacy successes in the right patients with the right target at the right time in the disease. With the digital twin models, because it's based off of causal AI, where we're actually explicitly taking connections between every level and every stage of the biological process in the patients with these diseases, we can follow that pathway through so that we can see how will these interventions actually affect the clinical outcomes in the disease process at the end of the day. This is very exciting. Everyone's talked about how exciting it is. The struggle, of course, is the proof point at the end, because this is such a long process getting through to the end of this, and how do you validate this along the way? And that's what we constantly run into. But what's exciting about the math that the causal AI approach can do is it actually helps us go through each step. So we can at least start with some of those validation experiments of, well, okay, but we think it gets all the way to this clinical feature. What is the actual biology along the way, and how do we test it at each steps? But even that can be a struggle for computational companies. So one thing I'm really excited about is how we are getting into these partnerships where we are working with different companies, different partners to bring back that information about each of these experiments at these different levels and filling in the biology. And I think that's been a theme we've talked about, is that we really need to fill in the functions, the biology, what's happening at each level, so that we have this, gold standard things to train all of our models on and things like that. And so that's what I'm excited about and where we're trying to fit in the process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeanne. So we've talked a lot about data, processes. We're in a university, future of the workforce. It's something that I'd like to touch on, and in particular on two fronts. The first one is if you were giving a blank sheet of paper and you could build something from scratch, knowing what you know now and where you are, how would you do it differently? And then the second thing is if you could couple that to how do you see the need for upskilling, the need for different kind of training so that coming out of universities or training programs, perhaps we can further accelerate this uptake and this ultimate, output trajectory. Just maybe, Crystal, from your experience.
Sure. So, what I'll say is, I think right now one of the biggest challenges or one of the biggest gaps when it comes to leveraging AI is there is the theoretical potential and then there's the implementation of what you can actually do. If I could go back and just say, okay, here's a blank sheet of paper, how can I do this differently? The truth is, I do nothing differently because you have to, every failure, every data set that you thought was gonna come back this way, every hit that you thought that was gonna come back the way that you designed, you have to be able to take that and that leads you to the next step. So I actually wouldn't do anything different, but what I would do is make sure that I am looking at all of the different opportunities. So as we're thinking about things like target selection and how we wanna prioritize, especially as an early stage startup, I think it would be, I would go into it a little bit more armed in how we're thinking about partnering, how we're thinking about our first couple of targets that we want to pursue, especially when you have limited resources in the beginning. You have to be really careful about where you're focusing your efforts. So I would have more of a very specific plan, but the truth is I would fail faster to bring that time down, but I would fail just in the same way because that failure led me to the next, and that's allowed us to get from Nova Engine Gen 0 to Gen 2 in less than 6 months. So the failures are necessary for the successes.
Wonderful. Just pulling a little bit on this then, in terms of the talent that you've seen come into your company and perhaps moving forward, what would be a piece of advice here for trainees as far as how should they present themselves to you?
Yes, I love that question. It is so important to me to find the diamonds in the rough. I've had to ask a lot of, or answer a lot of questions as to how have we built a team that's just really outstanding. I brag on them all the time. And it's because instead of looking at exactly what's on paper or who would be the common ideal candidate, we have really looked at things very differently. So when I decided to select the CTO, I needed someone who, yes, was a genomics expert, and yes, he could do things in MLM, but I needed someone who could think completely outside of the box about how we're approaching a lot of these different decisions and how we want to go about building these different iterations, how we're going to go back and solve them. And I think that comes from looking at people who have incredibly different backgrounds and then marrying them with experts who've done this a time or two and know it inside and out. So, for example, one of our key advisors who spends a lot of time with us is Alex Wesselhoff, who was one of the co-founders of Orna Therapeutics, who obviously does so much in circular RNA therapeutic development and discovery. You marry someone like him with someone like Steve, who does not have a traditional biotech background, but has built amazing tech, amazing MLM models, and you put those two minds together, and what we've been able to accomplish is just out of this world. So I think when you're thinking about talent sourcing, when you're thinking about how to properly build a team, you have to look at the chemistry that exists because that's how you're able to make those kind of progressions.
Jeanne, can you bring your own perspective on team building, technical training, what you see on the workforce sort of that's ready off the shelf versus what maybe you have
absolutely.
to do in-house?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do a lot of this. We bring in a lot of scientists across a lot of different disciplines, a lot of areas, and so the chemistry and how they work together is critical. But the real thing that I'm looking for, because I mean, we're doing a kind of math that nobody's really learned in there, maybe a little bit briefly, not many people are an expert in it for sure when they come in, is we're looking for the people who have the flexibility, and what I always say is learning agility. That's my key word, is people who want to learn new things. Like, that's their actual goal, because that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to not do something again, but to learn and to build a new way to learn and a new way to learn how to learn. And as we keep doing that, it's different every time. So I actually look for people who have built something off to the side completely separate from their dissertation or primary studies, because those are the people who are they're interested in tackling a problem, they're interested and they're expanding all different ways. And so those are sort of the key things that I look for. I don't know how helpful that is to, but those are the kinds of things that I think really bring you to success in this area. I think, bringing in experts, especially in the biological side, is critical and key. We've talked about that a lot here as well. But for the actual people on my team who are deploying our platform, that's really the key thing I look for, is sort of that flexibility of their engagement with what they're doing.
Can I add on that? Because I think that's such a key point. I think the flexibility and really knowing yourself, that's what I look for when someone's adding to the team. How do you work best? And I always challenge anybody that's going to work for us, with us, with what happens if we don't do it? And I think from there, you get why people are really doing what they do. It can't all be about money. It can't all be about, a certain level that you're trying to reach in your career. I always want to know, why are you pursuing this? What made you go into this field? What happens if you don't work with us? What don't we do? And when you can answer those questions, I feel okay, now we can change some things. Now we can do something major.
That's great. Marinka, if you can maybe also bring your perspective and also add maybe one other thing, which is what's holding us back? Beyond well-curated data sets, math, operations research, great, but really fundamentally, what do you see every day that if we could solve for that, we're going to just get to the next level?
Absolutely. So I think of AI helping advance and empower scientific discovery in two different ways. And so the first pillar is just making our everyday research work faster, better, more efficient. Second is providing insights that might have not been possible using traditional models just a few years ago at scales, temporal or spatial, that are not easily experimentally probed. And I comment on the second part earlier a bit. So just commenting on the first component a bit, I think that there is just the kind of technologies that are being developed allow us to go about our research work much more effectively. I would estimate that in my group of 20 or so students, of which 10 are PhD students, since last year to this year, I would say that it's almost like I have 11 PhD students at the cost of 10 PhD students. There's at least one FDA or not more that in terms of improved efficiency for our research work by being able to write code faster, brainstorm research ideas faster, do literature research faster, process, curate data sets faster, perform case studies analysis to evaluate AI model outputs faster, better. And so this is in part driven what I call is more agentic view of AI models nowadays, where we think about a compound AI system that does not consist of a single LLM, but instead consists of a number of tools. Some tools can be standard machine learning models. Other tools can be, think of biological calculators like BLAST. Third type of tools might be many APIs. So when we are looking at outputs of our AI models, say around drug repurposing, it's not that I'm asking my student to go and now manually do Google search anymore, which is predominant approach, say 3, 4, 5 years ago. Instead, we have an LLM that is trained on 200 open APIs from FDA, which gives us direct access to all regulatory documents for all drug approvals since 1939. And so that then allows us to, at scale, evaluate model outputs, benchmark them as rigorously as we can, with, of course, many caveats that were discussed earlier today, much faster than what was just possible 2 years ago. So the future of academia, universities, to me, just fundamentally different. If I'm a hot take or if I'm slightly more speculative in that regard, I would say in some number of years, I would think of every PhD student have their own AI-based research assistant that would help them with some of these low-level tasks. And there would be more than that. Hopefully, there will be some level of autonomy achieved on that. What's the kind of fundamental limitation beyond many that were discussed earlier today, benchmarking, data sets, etc. I would say that I'm really curious and interested in forging new forms of partnerships that go beyond standard, say, research agreements between academic group and industry that would allow us to appreciate each other's more in terms of exciting science, exciting data and analysis are being done across this entire ecosystem, and being able to collaborate with each other perhaps more effectively and exchange ideas and knowledge is something that I think would be quite impactful in addition to large-scale data sets and understanding of model generalization and benchmarking.
That's wonderful. just maybe to extend on that, building consortiums, more collaborations, data sharing, right? Getting out of the silos. I think that's also what I'm hearing. We just got a couple of minutes here before the lunch break, so maybe we can open it up here, please.
Thank you so much for, like, it's really nice to see great badass women up there and talk about it. So, yeah. Thank you. I would like to challenge you a little bit. It's really nice to talk about how we're going to pick up the talents and how we appreciate cross-disciplinary talents, right? But how feasible that is in the real life, especially like most people here in academia or venture ecosystem, where we got more flexibility, to choose what type of the talents we want to include. However, we do also understand biotech and healthcare is a very expensive industry, and sometimes the real things happen at a bigger pharma, like corporations and things like that. And people who are in this industry mostly have to take medical doctors, MD or PhD, to be taken seriously. So smart people, they're great, but smart people have smart people's issue, and they focus on very, very, like one niche. Not saying it's not great, it's what's supposed to be excellent, extraordinary to be professional, right? But to have this kind of silo, to have that more focused mindset rather than cross-disciplinary mindset, I'm just going to, challenge you a little bit how feasible that is in the real industry world. Thank you.
Who wants to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think, except I'm not sure I completely, because I think that, I think having a cross-disciplinary mindset is pretty feasible. Is that the question, or am I mean, I feel like half the time when people are introducing their training, I'm like, oh, wow, because it has so little relationship to what they're currently doing a lot of times. So I'm a little surprised by the question. And I think that, as you move through your career and you get started, I mean, yeah, this is just what I think. I think that your education is the backbone and the foundation, and you specialize in something, but you're really, like I sort of said before, you're learning about how you are going to continue to learn about things and work through, and what's the way that you work, how are you going to be successful, and you bring that to whatever you take. And I mean, of course, yes, it's important to be able to have the right chemistry, again, to know that this is a person who's going to work well with the mindset of our team, which is clearly not the mindset of every team. But every team and every manager has to figure that out, I think. So I think that there's, maybe it's just very personal and very specific to, but I think there's opportunities.
Well, and I can
Sorry,
speak.
Let me just jump in. I mean, feel free afterwards also to carry forward the conversation. So just want to make sure, maybe one more question, if that's okay with everyone. Crystal, please, you can comment.
Yeah, so I'll quickly just add, with cross-disciplinary, I think it's a slippery slope. So I agree in a certain way of you have to be realistic in that, does the skill set apply? I think that you have to think outside of the box in the sense of, okay, I'm going to come over from automotive and I'm going to approach biotech. Well, I'm not going to be the person that's designing the way that we're doing folding structures, right? But I am the person who goes, why doesn't biotech approach cost pricing models in this more accelerated fashion in a bundling way that allows us to be able to better serve? There are all these different ways that I have questions that people who have been in this and they've gone the entire traditional route, they don't have. When you marry those two things together, what you get is magic, and that's something that we've learned in our startup, right? So a lot of times I won't know the answer, so I'll go, well, what happens if we do it? What happens if we don't do it? Why are you so married to this baby? Because our scientists who we love and our engineers love their babies, and they get so married to them. Because I'm not a scientist, I'm not married to that baby. So I go, I know you love it. Tell me why I need to do it, and tell me what happens if I don't do it. How much does that cost me? How are we thinking about entering? When I talk to this biopharma and I'm talking to them about partnerships and how we're going to commercialize and how we're going to develop, I don't have any emotions tied to it, and that's actually an asset, right? But my CSO is very emotional, and he should be, because he cares that much about what he's been working on research for the last 12, 15 years of his career. It's about, from a leadership standpoint, and this is something I'm incredibly passionate about as CEO, you have to look at things in a way other people don't. You have to identify the gaps other people don't, and that's how you make good on, sure, I didn't come from this industry, but that's how we came up with that idea,
Wonderful. I think you guys should consider inviting each one of them for your own separate events. One more question, please.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for being here. These are really fruitful conversations, especially for us younger folks. One of the questions I have concerns automation for computational pharmacology. Previously, I worked on leveraging open access data for the creation of chemogenomic libraries. And of course, there's a lot of great data out there, but there's also a lot of junk data. I noticed that there's kind of a lack of common language among benchtop scientists, different representations of small molecules. And I was looking for, repurposing small molecules, and I found a lot of difficulties in how they were represented, how they're explained, how the data is collected on them. So I'm just wondering, how can we encourage a common knowledge, a common language across disciplines?
Perhaps I can take this quickly. It's a long-standing problem that anyone working in this area on various problems has at some point had to address, where we have data sets that are fragmented across many repositories, often encoded in different biological, medical vocabularies, ontologies. And that's the problem with molecular representations. I would argue it's even more challenging when we think about clinical phenotypes or definitions of diseases and how potentially limited where we are if we use definitions as they come from standard billing vocabularies. I see here many opportunities, and there's lots of ongoing research leveraging this type of multimodal LLMs in order to provide a more universal interface to a number of different vocabularies by either redefining vocabularies, help ontology builders, which are these massive communities that are creating and updating vocabularies to be able to be faster and more efficient with their work. And I think there are lots of opportunities here about standardization through the use of AI models that can help us and do this pre-screening first so that human experts would review and approve whether something can be linked together rather than manually be doing that. And I think that's one way how we can think about this forward beyond the standards that were mentioned and discussed extensively earlier today.
Wonderful. So it's time to wrap things up. 1 second, we'll have a quick announcement. But I think here, just listening to the exchanges, there's obviously a huge technical component to this whole conversation, right? That's a given. That's why many of us are here too. But what you've also heard is a huge human dimension, right? At the end of the day, it's about, like I was sort of half jokingly with Jason saying, you got to move the crates from the trucks to the shelves, and you need people to do that, right? So you've heard about the power of partnerships, the right kind of partnerships, as you heard from Jason. That's really important, right? Any partnership is not necessarily the right one. But we've also heard things like how to better understand biology. I think what's implicit to all of this is that we've got to marry the right modality, whether it's a circRNA, a small molecule, an antibody, to the right mode of action, but we've also got to target this this bazooka, sorry for the analogy here, onto the right problems, right? And so as you heard from Jason, you also understand that it's important for us to keep digging into the biology of diseases, and that's also where I think universities have a huge role to play, making sure that the biological insights are reproducible, because biopharma is a huge consumer of those insights. Without those insights, this industry is not going to go forward, right? And that might explain also some of the attrition, because we cannot, in biopharma, be expected to understand both biology, discover drugs, develop them, and et cetera. So it's an ecosystem. It's about bridging those forces together, and it's about human and also technical solutions. So with that, I want to really thank the panelists. This was awesome, really. I've learned so much. Thank you.